Good morning, everyone. Very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to our Sunday morning meditation, sponsored by the Insight Meditation Community of Washington, IMCW, and the Center for Mindful Living, CML, which is under the umbrella of IMCW. And we've had a class for Sunday morning going back more than 20 years now, and it's good to be with you. As many of you know, I'm teaching a couple of weeks a month now, normally the first and third Sundays, and Regina's typically teaching the fourth, and then we have a guest teacher or a Sangha-led session on the second Sunday. That's kind of more or less the current arrangements. And so it's lovely to see everyone. Hope you're all doing well. As that Chinese proverb says, we are living in interesting times. We won't get into the details of that. We'll stick to the basketball today. We'll put aside the trials and tribulations, as it were. The big trial of Gwyneth Paltrow. Anyway, I'm Hugh Byrne, and I've been teaching with IMCW for just I think it's my 20th year now. It started in 2003 and started teaching in 2000, and it's always great to be here on Sunday mornings, and I hope your weekend is going well. We've weathered the storms, and we behold all the folks in the southern states who've been through the tornadoes and still very much in the recent impact of that. In Arkansas, Little Rock, and other places yesterday, and then obviously Mississippi before. And people losing their lives, and so many people losing their homes, and just holding them all in loving kindness, in metta, and in our care and compassion today. So, what I would, what I want to focus on today is suffering and the end of suffering, and particularly interested, and we had some discussions offline about really making the teachings, the classes, as relevant to our daily lives as possible. So it's not abstract and theoretical, but as much as possible is these teachings and practices which were shared by the Buddha 2,500 years ago, and through the ages since then, down 100 generations, really for the purpose of freeing people from suffering, or at least alleviating suffering. That really is that's really why we're here. Whatever our individual kind of reasons we might want to come, and community is a big part of that, and practice, but the underlying everything, and at the center of everything is finding greater freedom in our lives, finding some more ease, more well-being, more happiness, more joy, and the possibility of the deepest happiness that the Buddha's teachings point to, that is unassailable, that's unshakable, that whatever the winds and the waves of life, it can't assail, one who has ended suffering in their lives. And this is kind of what the Buddha's teachings are all about, pointing to this this possibility of ending suffering in our lives. And even if, for most of us, it may not come to a complete ending of suffering in our lives, but hopefully for many of us, perhaps most of us, we will experience some significant alleviation of suffering, some greater freedom, some greater peace through these practices, through these trainings, through meditation, through mindfulness in daily life, through all of the other skillful practices. And since the beginning of the year, I've been exploring these, under the kind of the overarching umbrella of the paths of wellness and awakening, and distinguishing the kind of the search for well-being and on more of an everyday level, of everyday happiness and relative freedom from relative alleviation, at least, of stress and anxiety and fear and the kind of more afflictive emotions. And that side by side, really, with the teachings of awakening of the Buddha, which in a sense include all of that, include those freedoms that one develops and deepens on the way, but points to, I don't know what the best adjective is, but a loftier goal, a kind of a further goal of complete freedom from suffering. And so I want to explore that today as much as possible in a practical way, in a kind of really looking at our own lives, and where we may find ourselves stuck. And I'm going to use a number of metaphors today, because I think metaphors can be quite helpful. Stuck is one we're all familiar with, I think. Hooked is another one. Hooked, particularly if it's, the connotation of, drugs and alcohol, being hooked in that way. And obviously not limited that, but the other ways we get hooked. And another one I like a lot is tangled, because we often, it may not be the grossest forms of suffering that we experience, but we certainly are often in a tangle, like, how do I do? What do I do? How do I respond here? Why am I feeling these feelings towards this person? And can I let go of some of them? And, just the tangles that we get caught up in, tangles of stress, fear, anxiety, tangles of craving, tangles of confusion and doubt, and kind of not knowing, well, what should I be doing and what will be most helpful. So anyway, that's kind of just a little bit of a kind of background, and what we'll do is we'll begin, as we do, with a meditation, 20 minutes or so of meditation. And then there'll be a talk, and then after that, some sharing. And I think what we'll do is we'll share in the full group today. Just mention as well, we won't be having movement today. Or Emily's not feeling well, so we wish her well, but she's not with us today. So we'll just move on through and probably finish at our regular time of 12 today. So again, if you're just joining us, a very warm welcome to you, and we'll take some moments to arrive and sit together. So begin by finding a comfortable, relaxed posture. So sitting with your back straight, maybe inviting the shoulders to relax. And letting your awareness come into the body. You might consciously kind of drop the attention down out of the head, out of the thinking mode, down into the body. So feeling the contact of your body with the surface beneath you, with the chair or with a cushion or whatever you're sitting on. If you're sitting, and if you're walking, or if you're lying down, just adjusting accordingly. Just relaxing into being here, closing your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And it can be helpful to take a few minutes at the beginning of a meditation just to help yourself arrive as fully as you can and settle into being here. One helpful practice is just to take a few longer, deeper breaths. So in your own time, nice deep in-breath and a long, slow out-breath. Helping the body and the mind to settle into being here, to shift out of the kind of the busy mode, the doing mode. Often it can be a fight or flight mode. We're kind of getting, in a defended mode. And just coming into that, what's often called relaxed, rest and digest mode. Parasympathetic nervous system. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. Just letting yourself settle into being here. And open to what's present for you right now. If you had an image of your body as a whole, and including the physical body and all the energy in the physical body, but also the mind, the consciousness. Just be aware right now of what's noticeable, what's predominant in your experience. Just make space for what's here. Just allow whatever is here to be here. So whatever bodily feelings may be noticeable, maybe you're breathing or an uncomfortable feeling somewhere in the body or a pleasant feeling somewhere in the body. See if you can just allow what's here to be here, to let it come and go. The practice begins by turning toward our experience. Often our focus is on, what's outside of us and what we need to change to feel okay or to feel comfortable. We choose to turn inward and just open to what's present. And we meet what's present, or we have the intention of meeting what is present with kindness and with acceptance and without judgment. So whatever is here right now, can it be okay? The lines from Dorothy Hunt's poem, "Peace is this moment without judgment, this moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome." So many different ways and metaphors that we can express this attitude that we bring, or we endeavor to bring to our experience. Welcoming the guests in Rumi's phrase, metaphor. Saying yes to what is, saying yes to what's here. Radical acceptance, deep-rooted acceptance of of this moment, this experience, just as it is. At the heart of our practice is the art or the practice of paying attention and the attitude with which we pay attention to our experience, the attitude with which we meet what's here now. So inviting an attitude of friendliness, of kindness, of acceptance to what is here for you right now. Nothing left out, nothing rejected. Oh, I shouldn't be feeling this. And if the thought comes up or the movement comes up to push something away, see if you can make space for that too. Make space for the resistance, for the not liking of something. And if it's helpful, you can just let your attention rest on your breathing as an anchor that can help you be here. Or a home base where you rest your attention, and then when the mind goes off, gets pulled off somewhere, you just gently come back again, kindly come back again. Notice if there's any feeling of not liking your experience or wanting something to be different. That this moment in some way isn't okay. I don't like this feeling. I'm too hot, too cold, too achy, too tired, too this. Or I wish I had that. Wish this wasn't happening. At the heart of our practice is to investigate our suffering, to really be curious about, in a non-judging and a kind way, just be really curious about when we do get into feeling stuck or feeling hooked or tangled or craving or caught in aversion. We can't find a way out of suffering, out of being hooked or tangled, without first acknowledging that we are tangled, that we are hooked, that we are caught up in something. Not that it's wrong, but just that if this is what's here, this is what's here. So just recognizing it when it's present, and that feeling of not liking, not wanting. When in the Pali language, the word is dukkha, D-U-K-K-H-A. And one of the best, though not such an elegant translation, is unsatisfactoriness. Some sense of things not being satisfactory or the way we want them to be. And when we experience that, just to acknowledge it, recognize it. Whether it's here right now, something you're experiencing right now, or more in everyday life. It's just really essential to do this investigation, just recognizing, when this, what we broadly call suffering, is present. And then the next turn, if you like, is to see what is my role in this suffering, in this unsatisfactoriness? In the Buddha's teachings, Buddha taught that the cause of suffering is craving. Tanha is the Pali word, kind of meaning thirst. It captures probably better the kind of pulling stuff towards us, but it includes the pushing away as well, the aversion, and the kind of being lost, being distracted, being kind of avoiding. Whenever there's suffering in this Dharma sense, there's always some way in which we're kind of in some kind of unskillful relationship with our experience, wanting things to be different, wanting what we like to continue, wanting what we don't like to go away. Can you see that, either in practice or at least in understanding, can you see that relationship, that nexus of the holding, kind of getting hooked, and the suffering, as two sides of the same coin? We can bring this curiosity, this investigation to suffering and the cause of suffering in our own direct experience. What am I doing that is in some way kind of keeping me on the hook, keeping me tangled? These, as many will have noted, are the first of the two noble truths, the first two of the four noble truths of suffering and the cause of suffering. And then, as we become familiar with our own relationship to our suffering, there's a possibility that we can make some space around that holding or clinging or craving or being hooked, and let go, maybe seeing that it isn't helpful for us, that it is causing us suffering, and to be able to, it's like holding on to something really tightly in our fist, and just recognizing we can open the fist, we can kind of drop the thing we're holding. Sometimes it would be like dropping a burning coal, an immediate thing. Sometimes maybe a little more gradual. This is the third noble truth, the freedom that comes with letting go, with untangling ourselves from suffering, from clinging. And the fourth of the noble truths is really the path of practice that leads us to the end of suffering. All of the skillful qualities that we cultivate, compassion and generosity and gratitude and loving kindness, equanimity, a whole range of qualities, patience, non-judgment, that support us, and all the practices of letting go a little, letting go maybe a little more. All of these help move us towards letting go. So we can do this exploration in our own lives and in our own meditation practice. Just this investigation. This is just a very short, attempt to encapsulate this kind of absolutely central teaching of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths, around which all of the other teachings revolve and come back to. So I'm going to be quiet now for a few minutes and just kind of sit with what's coming up for you and, these practices, if they're helpful. In any moment, being able to come back, the mind will go off, get distracted, get pulled into something. And this present moment is always available. Just have to remember to come back. And our practice is really a practice of remembering and strengthening this capacity to remember what matters, to come back, to be here now. Finish with this poem by Mary Oliver, kind of as maybe speaks to the journey that we're on, the spiritual journey of inner transformation, transforming our hearts. A poem that the journey says, one day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice that you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life that you could save. So again, welcome everyone. I'm curious, if that meditation, if there's anything of that you might have found helpful or not helpful. If not helpful, just leave it behind. There's a million other meditations, but what's very close to my heart is to kind of bring together the kind of this, certainly in terms of not just the Four Noble Truths, but certainly with the Four Noble Truths, and really look at it practically in terms of our lives. It's been really helpful for me to really shine kind of the spotlight inward of, when I am caught up in something, I'm wanting something to be different than it is. That's often the form dukkha takes, I'm wanting something. I'm wanting this person to be different or this situation to be different. And, there's a holding, there's a kind of holding, clinging to that. And how do we work with that? How do these teachings, the whole body of teachings, and particularly this central teaching of the Buddha on the Four Noble Truths, how can we use it? And I often think of it, I guess I'm moving into the talk now. I often think of the metaphor of a key, of like using the Four Noble Truths as a key to unlock a door, to get us out of something that's not fun, like being imprisoned, for example, that we can, have a key, and this is a key to get out. And, what I wanted to do, in the meditation was really point to, particularly that kind of recognizing where we are in some way kind of hooked. And, quite possibly for quite a lot of you during the meditation, you might not have been in the place of being, caught up in feeling angry about somebody or something, or kind of wanting, I need to have this. That may be something more for not when you're meditating, more for daily life. But I think we're all familiar with it, and we can just do a little bit of a mental exercise to kind of think, oh yeah, yesterday I was caught up in that. And to be able to see like, okay, I'm caught up, and really to see this, as I say, this nexus, this relationship between how I'm meeting my experience and the suffering, because those are, in the Buddhist understanding of dukkha, suffering, and of freedom, they're inexorably intertwined. And if we're gonna find our way out of suffering, we have to see what our own role is with the suffering, in terms of suffering, how we're creating the suffering. Now, again, I've got to be careful about saying that. I'm not saying like we're not blaming ourselves for that. I'm not putting it out in that way or judging ourselves or saying somebody else isn't responsible for what they're responsible for. Not at all. I'm really just talking about just accepting, like, if we are in that place of being hooked, what is my role in, in perpetuating that? And kind of wanting to kind of bring this back to, just the overall teachings of the Buddha. What I say is that, like, for the Buddha, this question of suffering and the end of suffering was really an existential one, an existential question. It was the reason let me say why it was existential. It was existential in the sense that how we address this question of suffering is freedom possible? Is it possible to let go of suffering? Is it possible to end suffering in our lives? This question, in a sense, for the Buddha, was the most important question in life. Much more important than the question of, well, can we send people to the moon? Or even can we end poverty? Because if we're going to end poverty, we really need, as well as the technologies and the actions and the policies and the practices, we also need that transformation of the heart to be able to really see each other in a wholly different way. So, in a sense, the bedrock for everything is the transformation, certainly the Buddha's understanding, the transformation of the human heart. I mean, the transformation of our, my heart, our way of being in the world, that we can change our hearts, we can transform our hearts. And when we do, then a life of the deepest peace and joy and freedom is possible. And if we don't, then we just keep kind of going around on the kind of the treadmill or the cycle, the circle of suffering, in on the, in Buddhist language, it's called the wheel of samsara. Samsara really means mindless wandering, endless wandering, just wandering round and round and round. We probably experience that in our own lives at times, where we get caught up in, I keep doing this over and over again. Why do I keep doing it? And not, being able to find our way out of it. And it's really in that nexus I was talking about of seeing, okay, what am I holding on to that is perpetuating the suffering? And then if I can see that, then I can let go. As a wonderful Dharma teacher who died 3 years ago, Rob Babaya, I spoke about it. He says, it's the seeing that frees. It's the seeing that frees. It's the insight into that holding that allows us to let go, that frees us from suffering. When we see that, it's like, if the image of the burning coal, it's like we see it so clearly and boom, it doesn't always happen that quickly, but we see in our own suffering what is true really for everyone. We see the truths of impermanence, that everything is changing. And when we're suffering, we're not recognizing impermanence. We're thinking that, often we're thinking, oh, this horrible feeling, this anxiety or stress that I'm feeling, or this fear, it's going to last forever, or this craving is going to last forever. We live under the illusion quite often that something which is temporary and changing and impermanent is going to go on. It's going to keep on lasting. Because if we knew it was going to go, and if we were willing to expand our window of tolerance to be with difficult feelings, then it would go. As the Tibetan Buddhists say, these emotions, these thoughts, these mind states, they self-liberate. They free themselves. We don't even need, in a way, what we need to do is just get out of the way, get out of our own way. And then, even a really, really strong emotion, of like really intense fear, if we can, if we have the resources and the capacity to open to it, it will come and go like everything else. And it only really becomes afflictive when we identify with it, when we treat something like that as the truth rather than a changing, impermanent phenomenon. And we see that, then letting go is possible. We can see that, but insofar as we get caught up in it, we believe in that story that the mind is telling us. We also create a sense of a separate self around, whenever we're clinging, whether it's to something we're wanting, I've got to have it. There's a sense of a self that gets created, and the self isn't something real and solid. It's a mind creation that is really a solidification of my clinging, of my holding. It's like, with that clinging, I've got to have this, got to get rid of this. I hate this person. I hate this situation. There's a me and there's a them or it or her or him, them, whatever. It's the situation. There's a separation, and in that separation, there's dukkha, there's unsatisfactoriness, there's suffering. So for the Buddha, this question was absolutely central, and all of the teaching. So it was an important enough question for Siddhartha. He's often referred to as the Bodhisattva at that stage because he's not yet the Buddha. He's someone on that path to awakening. He's kind of committed to a path to awakening. So the Bodhisattva leaves this, life in Beverly Hills or, whatever, Potomac, wherever, Fifth Avenue, that's luxurious, that's comfortable, the kind of 2,500 year ago version of that, a noble life and 4 palaces, one for each season. But realizing that there's a deeper issue at stake than just everyday happiness, everyday comfort and having all of the food and the drink and the experiences that we think are so wonderful and lovely, that ultimately they don't solve the lasting questions. That when we get old and we die, sick and die, what use is it going to be to us to have had a life where we had luxurious meals and all these wonderful experiences. Experiences are great. I'm not putting them down, but if that's what we're looking for happiness in, then it's not going to be a very good way of experiencing genuine happiness. Yes, we can have fun, and it's great to visit places, and I love to do that as much as anybody. But it's not. But real happiness is about the transformation of the heart. It's about the inner transformation rather than getting, having, or even doing. And so, so he became a wandering mendicant, wandering, begging bowl, nothing owned, because this question of suffering and the end of suffering was so important to him. It was, and he was willing to engage in these very, rigorous training in meditation, what we learned from the suttas, from the discourses. He, became a very adept meditator in two different, traditions, offered leadership of those groups, etc. But I haven't solved this question of suffering. And then he goes on his, as many of you know, the austere path where he punishes the body in order to attain freedom. And we're familiar with that. It's in many, many different spiritual religious traditions. People doing really austere practices. And by the sound of things, if you read the suttas, read the discourses, that he was very, very close to death. He was punished the body so much that he was a hair's breadth away from death. He hadn't eaten. Lived on a grain of rice a day. But then there's this insight, this understanding, this actually a memory he has from being a child and entering into, while his father was leading a harvest festival, entering into a state of deep peace and well-being and remembering that when he was maybe 8, 9 something years old and sitting under a rose apple tree. And that kind of gives him a glimmer that, well, this is that perhaps, not even more than perhaps, that the path to ending suffering isn't through austerities, isn't through punishing the body, and that pleasure can be part of it, as long as it's not a clinging pleasure. So the pleasure of wonderful calm and bliss of meditation, those are very important. Those are something to be developed and enjoyed. Pleasure isn't wrong. It's only when there's clinging. It's the clinging that's the problem, not the pleasure. And states of meditation, as some have probably experienced, can be deeply blissful, peaceful, calm, tranquil, joyful, all of those things. Maybe not a lot of the time, practice can be tough, but those can be the fruits of the practice, not the end of the practice, but fruits of the practice. And so he recognizes that, and then the rest kind of sitting under the Bodhi tree, the realizations, the insights that he comes to. And he teaches out of this understanding for 45 years, and the teachings that have come down to us really, are all around, they all revolve around this first teaching that he gave, which was the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. Because, and coming back to that metaphor of the key, it's so central because it really does unlock the door, if you like, of suffering, as a way out of suffering. Because if we can come to that seeing, that investigation of, firstly, is there suffering? And for most of us, a lot of the time, there will be some kind of suffering, some kind of mental anguish, anxiety, fear, wanting, distraction, confusion. There'll be some version of that. But what we typically do, tell me if I'm off base here, but what we typically do is we find ways of covering it over. We develop habits of avoidance. If I'm feeling something that's not very nice, not very comfortable, I don't like this, and I can go and get a glass of wine or a pill or a cookie or a piece of cake or an ice cream or whatever your poison might be, whatever your pleasure might be, and for a while at least kind of tamp down the feelings of fear or anxiety or wanting, then, it's understandable that we would do this unless we see a better way, a way. And for most people, there isn't. Most people, and this is where compassion really has to come in. For most people, it's not even on the radar screen to think that there is a way out of these expressions of suffering that we get, these habitual expressions of suffering that we get caught up in. It's not even, it's just not even, it's not even in the realm of, it's not even in the field of awareness to think. I had just a little bit of an aside, but maybe it might be helpful to kind of get this across with a conversation I had with a family member. I won't go into more details, but with a family member, very, very, very smart, in all the ways, very smart, intelligent, way engaged in the world, etc. But asking about pain and had this discussion about pain and pain, and he said pain is just pain. You feel pain and you feel, it's pain, it's painful, and I said, well, actually, pain is also about how we relate to the pain. It's not just a solid thing in itself, because I might have something that's painful, but if I can meet it with kindness, with acceptance, if I can make space for it, if I can do the inner practices that we were doing in meditation and we do in this, on this path, then we may be able to meet that pain, it got no real pain in the body, not in any way denying the reality of pain, but our relationship to our pain can certainly attenuate the pain. It can lessen it. It can lessen the afflictiveness, the difficulty, that, in a sense, the pain of the pain. It's often said, I don't know the exact science of this, but that some 60 or 70% of our pain is how we relate to it. And if we have a pain and it's like, oh, I don't like it, I don't want it, and we put like walls up around it, we're actually exacerbating the pain. We're making the pain more difficult. Or if we have a fear and then we have, we don't want to look at that fear because it's so scary, then we've created another fear around the fear, and we can kind of create walls around walls. And then we avoid ever really going into the direct experience of okay, this is here right now. What happens when I bring a kind, accepting, non-judging awareness to this fear or this pain or this feeling of discomfort? What happens? And what we will find happens is that something changes. Because our relationship, it's not fear. Pain doesn't exist as a thing. Fear doesn't exist as a thing. It's always a relationship. It's me feeling fear. It's you feeling fear. Sometimes it may be us feeling fear. Something happening we're all experiencing. Some shared reality, shared experience. But even then, each of our experiences of it will vary depending on what are the qualities that we bring to this experience, to this moment. And because, I mean, the deepest, understanding in Buddhism and the truth of emptiness is nothing has a permanent existence. It's always relational. It's always, something is always a product of different conditions coming together. It's me or you meeting a particular situation, and how we meet it is fundamental in how we experience it. It actually changes the nature of the experience itself. There isn't an experience. The experience comes from the meeting of, the news or the feeling or the emotion and what we bring to it, how we meet it. So again, it's coming back to this relationship, this nexus with our experience. So again, coming back to the Buddha, this question of suffering and the end of suffering was an existential question, and all of the teachings, everything that the Buddha teachings comes back to, revolves around suffering and the end of suffering. It's I was thinking, it's like the alpha and the omega of the teachings. It's the beginning and the end. And if we can work this experience, this situation, if we can work with the truth about suffering and the cause of suffering and the possibility of ending suffering, we actually have the key in that. This is I would say, the essence of the Buddha's teachings is we have the key to unlocking the, I'd call it the most, they won't see and kind of offer, I'd say, if this is helpful, take this, use it in your own life. So it wasn't as if like, oh, I'm only telling this to a few people. This was the teachings available to, but it's almost like secret, because it's, most people would be like, oh, no, there's something flawed in that. Pain is pain. Going back to my example, it was like, we were talking about, well, pain isn't just pain. Pain is in the relationship, is core to that, to how we experience our pain. If we can understand this, and if we can really see how the way we meet our experience transforms our experience, changes our experience, and that meeting our experience wholeheartedly, saying yes to what's here, opening to the joys and the sorrows and everything in between, then this is the way that we untangle the tangles. I have a lot to share around this, but I think what I'm going to do is, just given time today, I think I'm going to maybe talk more about this next time, because I want to talk about some metaphors of being caught up in suffering, particularly the metaphors of being hooked and being tangled. So I think what I'll do is, just for the last few minutes of this talk, and then we'll move into some sharing. I just highlight a couple of the metaphors, and this one I've talked about it, a couple of times in the past. There's a wonderful short teaching of the Buddha called the Jata Sutta, Jata, and Jata means tangle, and it's a very short teaching, and it's about a Brahmin guy comes to the Buddha, and he says to the Buddha, a tangle within, a tangle without. People everywhere are tangled in a tangle. And he says, Master Gautama, the Buddha's family name, Master Gautama, who can untangle this tangle? So lots of tangles in that, tangle. And, for me, I love this metaphor of a tangle, because I think so much of the suffering I've experienced in my life, is being entangled. And I think of it as like a ball of wool of different colors, and they're all raveled up together, and you can't really use it because it's kind of all tangled together. So you kind of have to do that unraveling and untangling. And so he asks the Buddha that, and the Buddha doesn't say to him, no, that's not true. He kind of takes as a given, yes, the people are tangled in a tangle. Who can untangle? Who can get out of this tangle? And the Buddha says, basically he says, one who is trained in wisdom and meditation and living virtuously, that person who's fully trained, a follower of the way, a follower of the Dharma, who's really done the work, can untangle or has untangled the tangle. So I think a lot of our suffering is, a lot of our experiences is finding ourselves entangled, and finding our way out of the tangle. And as again coming back to that, that central kind of investigation of where, for me right now, today, in this moment, or maybe tomorrow, or maybe, next week, where do I find myself caught up in suffering? Where do I find myself experiencing this dukkha, this unsatisfactoriness? And how can how am I holding on? What am I holding on to that perpetuates this suffering? And can I, in seeing that holding, can I loosen it? Can I let go? Can I let go a little? Can I let go a lot? Can I let go completely? I was thinking of it this morning as I was thinking about the talk today. That what came to me was every letting go, no matter how seemingly small, even if it's just a small, what seems like a small letting go, a kind of small opening, is a microcosm of the Buddha's awakening. Every letting go, however seemingly small, because it's, small and big are just kind of really the mind's creation. Who knows what's really small and what's really big? But however it may not seem like an earth-shattering thing, but each time we are able to let go, even a little, we find some freedom. Somebody that we were feeling really judgmental about, I hate this person, they're always doing this, blah, 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 that maybe we just see, get a glimpse of their suffering, and we say, oh yeah, they're having a really hard time. Maybe our heart opens to them, and we no longer so much looking at them through that lens of they're a bad person, they're this, they're that. And now we're looking at them much more through the lens of kindness. Nothing has changed except something has shifted in our own way of seeing that allows for some freedom. And what I'm saying here is that even that, what might seem like a small letting go, is a microcosm. It's a small encapsulation of that incredible awakening that's still, resounding down like a bell rung 2,500 years ago, that was still kind of ringing through the flowers, through the ether, from the Buddha's awakening. We think of that, that I could never awaken, and it is, it was an extraordinary insight into suffering, into the human condition. But each letting go is really a mini version of that. And when I thought of that, I thought, that's actually quite inspiring, because even the small things point to the bigger things. And, I often share Arjun Char's, let go a little, you'll experience a little peace. Let go a lot, you'll experience a lot of peace. Let go completely and you'll experience complete peace. Your struggle with the world will be at an end. That every little letting go, little in quotes, it points to that possibility of letting go. So I think it also, if we allow ourselves to take it in, can be a real encouragement to keep on practicing, to let go a little bit more and experience maybe a little bit more freedom, a little bit more opening of the heart, a little bit more peace and joy. And, all that opens up. As this is a gradual path of training that sometimes includes, some really sudden, powerful awakenings. But overall, the Buddha laid out a gradual training to wake up and find freedom from suffering. I won't even get into Pema Chodron's wonderful image of Shempa. I've shared that, talked about that a little in the past, of being hooked. It's a great metaphor from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition of like a fish being caught with a hook, of how we get hooked and how we work with it. But I'll save that for next time. So I hope that there's some things in what I've shared today that will maybe be encouraging, maybe, helpful. And if not, don't worry about it. There's lots of other good things out there in the world. Leave it on your cushion. Thank you for your kindness. Thank you for your attention. I would love to, in the just for a few minutes, just have folks, if you'd like to share anything in the chat, if one or two people would like to share in the voice, with your voice. I'm really interested in this question, and maybe I'll invite this. I'll send out a message on this through the CML listserv, just of like, how tangles come up for you in your life. I mean, what are the main expressions they take? And I'd like to have maybe I'll do next time I'm teaching, which actually be a couple of weeks from now. But I'd like to kind of give most of the time to just sharing around that, because I think it'll be a really helpful discussion. And I've, as is my wont, I think I've gone on a little bit long today. Sam shared, I cling to the idea that I'm hungry. No, that's cool. Hunger is hunger. When hungry, just eat. That's what they say. Brian says, I'm aware of the habit of hypervigilance with respect to time future. Noticing the habit does not end the process, a deep habit. Yeah, that's a really good observation. I mean, I think some of you know I've written a couple of books on habits, so it's an area a theme close to my heart. And one of the things is, habits develop over the nature of a habit is to develop over time, because we do things, many times. And so just given that, it means that they have a tenacity to them that, can be not so easy to untangle ourselves from. And so we really do, as you're saying, Brian, we really need to kind of keep seeing it of like, okay, can I let go a little here, get pulled back into it? Can I let go a little here? A friend in another group shared something from Jung, which I liked. And it was that I think it was like, nothing in the psyche is ever lost. Was that it? Nothing in the psyche ever dies, and I kind of find that helpful. The habits don't die; they kind of go into, they go underground, and they're still like latent there. If the new conditions were to arise, they could come up again. So that's why awareness is so key. But thanks for that, Brian, and look forward to seeing you when you're back. And Bettina, you have your hand up, please.
Yeah. Did you say we can share out loud too?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you for a wonderful talk. It was very helpful. And I had a little insight, like, in terms of how am I complicit in my own suffering and sort of the habitual cycles. And I came up with the idea of confirmation bias, like an old story from childhood, right? Or, early programming, and how there's been a lot of sort of reenactment of that and some of those themes. And I realized today through your talk, thank you, that some of it is just wanting to be correct about my original early perceptions. And I need to let go of that. That's over. That's history. Doesn't matter. Why suffer and keep trying to, prove that? So I don't know if that makes sense, but it was helpful for me. So thank you.
Wonderful. No, I think absolutely. That's absolutely right in the heart of what I was talking about. I shared a couple of weeks ago, about my own personal experience of working with, the way I was, I judged my dad. He's been dead for 45 years now, and yet I was still looking at him through the lens of judgment and, criticism. And I was, fortunate, and I, like everything, like the psyche, nothing dies. Those patterns will probably still be there. But how healing it was to kind of say, I don't need to look at him through that judgment. He was who he was. As I say, he was who he was when he was what he was. That was who he was, and that I've been who I was, when I was what I was, and done stupid things and all of that. And, I don't need to, I don't need to beat myself up about it. I can acknowledge that, and I can have some remorse if it's something I did that was harmful. I can ask for forgiveness, all of that. But I don't. But holding on, and this is kind of the heart, as you're saying as well, Bettina. It's the heart of that clinging. It's like the clinging is the problem. And so, can we let go? And so, with my dad, it was like, oh, I don't need that. I don't need that judgment. I can actually think, okay, he was who he was at that time, and he made some mistakes, and he also loved us and loved me, and that whole kind of that possibility. I was like, oh, I could have a wholly different relationship with him, even though he died 45 years ago. It can change everything, and that for me, that was a microcosm for me of like a lot of other things of like, where else am I looking at people through the lens of judgments that are old, like your example, Bettina, that don't serve me anymore, and we have to see it before we can let go. Oh, I see this and it's not helping me. Just as the judgment of my dad wasn't helping me. It was just putting a barrier between me and him, and me and my memory of him, and me and my sense of our history together and our family history. And it doesn't serve. And this is, all of this is at the heart of the Buddha's teachings. It's like, yes, we can find a way out of suffering. Let's just take Francine, and then we'll have a 1 minute meditation and some announcements to finish. So, Francine.
Yeah, thank you, Hugh. So I've been dealing with trying to meet some physical pain that's been chronic for like 3 years. So I really got a lot from today because I realize I have this part of me that is worrying about, is this permanent? Is this not? At the same time, I'm trying to hold this vision that it could go away. I could invite in peace and joy and pleasure, and But so how do you meet it and hold that other possibility? That would be very helpful.
Yeah, I mean, what makes it hard to hold both of those things? Because, you know, meeting the experience wholeheartedly, and the possibility that anything could happen. Yes, it could get more intense, or it could get, it could go away completely. And if you can be in that don't know mind about that, you can still take care of things. You can get go get a second opinion. You can go, treatment, whatever. You can do all of that, but keep open. So the problem, as I've been talking about, the problem is when we're clinging to, I'm wanting it to be this way. I'm wanting it to be gone, for example. With pain, that's often. And so what we're doing, and really with all of the practices I was kind of pointing to today, they're all in some way counterintuitive. They're all in some way kind of like, they're not where our mind tends to default to. They're more like going against the grain, They're going against the grain of what we're used to doing. To actually say, oh, if I open to this pain, what happens when I meet it in a different way? So what happens when I meet it moment to moment in a really wholehearted way? I change whatever I can. If you can do things, to alleviate it, to be in a better position to meet it kindly, and also just have that don't know mind, have that beginner's mind of like, I don't know how it's going to go. Can I be okay in that don't know mind, in that not knowing? And that is definitely counterintuitive, because we don't like the don't know mind. These minds want to know, is this going to be better than that? What should I do? Do I buy the house? Do I take the job? It's like, we want that. But sometimes, but the wisdom really is to say, okay, can I be in this place of don't know? And it's a sticky place to be, but it's a fecund place. It's a fertile place.
So is it more than not knowing, but how about, can you invite in the, not just the not knowing, but the positive? Or is it okay? Like when you listen to law of attraction, it's about not avoiding,
right,
but also holding the possibility that it could be gone. Or what do you want to bring in to your life?
Yeah.
So you're saying not knowing seems to me different than bringing in a possibility that's positive.
No, that's I missed that. I missed that point. But yes, no, that's a great question. I mean, different people would have different views on this. My view on it is that it can be wholesome and it can be kind of a wishful thinking-y, and it depends on how you hold it. If you bring in positive energy and like, may I be, it's almost like a metta meditation or a compassion meditation. May I be happy? May I be well? May I be the best kind of version of myself that I could possibly be? Bringing all that in, I think, is really wholesome and really, really good to do. Thinking that somehow, I'm going to wish for something and I'll have a Mercedes Benz, as Janis Joplin might say, that's a different kind of thing of thinking, oh, I only need to envision that I am a billionaire. That's going to that kind of thing. I find it too much on the woo-woo side of things. But on the side of like inviting in and a kind of loving kindness, then yes, absolutely. And so it's like, in a certain way, some of those things can be a little on the delusional side. If you really believe that, that's my own view. Some people might say, well, you can wish things into existence. And yeah, Geraldine, I think you shared Joan Halifax's discussion of wise hope. I did a talk using Joan Halifax's yeah, her writings and her talks on that. I think that's really, really wise. Really, her approach is really, really wise.
What is that wise hope?
Joan Halifax. If you just Google Joan Halifax and Wise Hope, you'll get one or more articles.
Okay.
Excellent articles on hope in a positive rather than a wishful thinking kind of way. Thank you, Francine. And I'm conscious of time now, so. Let's do some announcements and just finish with a 1-minute meditation. Thank you, Kerry, for sharing that. That's great. I just a couple of things I want to share very briefly and then pass it over to Deb. One is at the end of this month, Regina and I are going to be doing a Sunday morning in person, drum roll, 3 years now, almost exactly 3 years since we were last at Iona. Maybe I don't think we've been there since, right, Shazzy? But we're gonna do. It's going to be a little longer. It's going to be like a mini retreat from 10:30 to I think 1:30, and we're going to do the online piece. So folks who are joining us from places you can't come to DC, we will have that. But then we'll also have a longer, a longer session for those who'd like to come in person, because I know a lot of people have been looking forward to doing more in person, and hopefully we'll do more of those too. So April 30, mark your calendar, put it down. I'm really looking forward to that and it'll be at Iona in Tenleytown, which is very close to the center, which we had there just around the corner on Wisconsin. So we'll share all of that in the coming, through CML, through other means in the period ahead. So I want to share that. If anyone's looking for a nice weekend, Rebecca and I are teaching up at Kripalu in 2 weeks. 2 weekends from now. I would be teaching here, but we changed the dates because of that retreat up at Kripalu. So if you're looking for a nice, beautiful place to practice just for a weekend, that it's a retreat on mindfulness, loving kindness, and poetry. So share that. Also, just mention that these teachings are freely offered in the spirit of dana or generosity. The teachings have come down through 2,500 years, and I think Deb has shared ways in which you can make a donation. So there's no cost to come along to these sessions, but you're invited to if you're able and inclined to share, to make a donation, and the dana goes to the teacher and me today and whoever is teaching. So thank you for your support and your generosity.